Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Economics Designs podcasts. We are very pleased to be able to welcome Colin Anderson to this week's podcast. Colin is a very experienced game developer, and we are looking today to talk a bit about the experiences that he has had in going from the more traditional Web 2 games into the newer Web 3 space. With that, Colin, I hand the floor over to you. Please let everyone know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name's Colin Anderson. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Reforged Games, which is a studio that we've set up specifically to look at the opportunities around the play-to-earn business model that's emerging within the video games space at the moment. And obviously, play-to-earn is kind of crosses over a lot with what's happening in Web3 and cryptocurrency at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an area that we're keeping a close eye on and looking to find out more about, essentially. So my role within the business is coming from a game development background. It's, as you mentioned, I'm an experienced game developer. I've been working in games for almost 30 years at this point, and I've never kept count, but I must have worked on over 100 games at this point in various stages, either as the person putting assets in the game or running the studio that's made the game. So I understand the development stack, top to bottom, if you like. But I'm also a long time enthusiast of Bitcoin. Got into Bitcoin originally in 2014, and went down the rabbit hole as we all do, I guess. Just exploring what blockchain meant, what the applications for it were, looking at other chains like Ethereum, and then all the other altcoins that were around that. So I spent a long time looking at that. And then actually there's been a real debate happening within the games sector as to what the purpose of blockchain is within video games. Because there's a really strong split in the games industry at the moment, where there's two camps. One camp says that blockchains are going to be the future of video games, and another camp that says blockchains are just pure evil. There is no place for blockchain in gaming, and that out of the question in gaming. And as somebody who kind of sits astride both those camps, and I understand video games deeply, but I also understand cryptocurrency deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of those positions seem to be based on on an informed position. They seem more ideological in that regard. And so I came at it from a neutral position of just wanting to understand, like, genuinely, what is the benefit of using blockchain in games? Are there any? Because I'm not presuming that there are.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, Reforged is about exploring the play-to-earn space within gaming, and blockchain is one possibility within that. But there are others, and as you'll know yourself, in your own game background, we've had economies in games for decades, and there are lots of examples of games that run successful economies,
mm-hmm.
have auction houses, allow players to sell assets, and do all the other things that we're talking about in Web3 gaming. Yeah. So a lot of this isn't as innovative or new to me as I think it might seem from people coming out from outside the industry. And so, I started writing a blog essentially just to go through the process of exploring exactly what the implications of blockchain in gaming were, because I'm somebody who finds I have to write things down in order to understand them.
Mm-hmm.
It allows me to get my thoughts straight. And so the process of writing it down, one, allows me to get my thoughts straight, but also then the act of publishing it means that it's all out there, it's public, and people can come and criticize it and tell me when I'm wrong, because I think that's really important, is making your thoughts public and having the ability for people to come and critique it and say where you're wrong. It just is a faster way of learning for me.
Yeah,
So
we'll be sure to put a link to that blog in the in the notes here so that people will have a chance to look at it.
Cool. Yeah, so that was the purpose of the blog, and really that's where we got to with Reforged. You know, Reforged was we were trying to do something a bit different with Reforged. I think most of the companies that we're aware of in the Web3 blockchain gaming space at the moment are starting with the premise of they're going to make a game. Like they're starting from scratch. They're going to make a game. It's going to be Web3 native, and they're going to build it around a blockchain and everything that comes off the back of it. The more that to me feels really risky, because I know how hard it is to build a game, and not just to build a game, but to build an audience for that game as well. It's incredibly hard. And so a lot of the investors that we've been talking to, I got the sense they didn't really understand just how difficult and challenging making a video game is to begin with. And so I'm seeing a lot of these companies at the moment who are taking that approach of they're making a game Web3 native and exploring the space from there. And I think I know a lot of them are already hitting challenges with that, and I think a lot more are going to hit challenges with it later on. So the approach we took it within Reforged was we came from the approach of we would much rather acquire a game that's Web 2 based, that essentially has the elements that we would require in order to build a successful Web 3 game, and then go through a conversion process, which is something that we're very used to in the gaming space, where we take a game that's been built on PC, for example, and we'll convert it to work on mobile. And I think a lot of people, again, who are maybe not familiar with the gaming industry, they might think, well, that's just easy. You just run it through a compiler and out pops a mobile version. But there's all sorts of challenges around that.
Absolutely.
Not just technical, but design. For example, interfaces are totally different. If you have a game that relies on a keyboard and a mouse on a PC, then as soon as you try to put that onto a touchscreen on a mobile device, there's all sorts of challenges that come off the back of that. So conversions are something that are very natural to games companies, and so we felt that was a much less risky way of exploring the possibilities of the space, because you were starting with a known tangible thing that you could build a crypto economy around.
Are you at liberty to discuss what type of project you guys are working on currently?
No, that part of it, because at the moment we haven't acquired a game yet. We're at the point where we're still looking for acquisition targets, essentially things, because it's like one of the challenges, and this is something that investors have said to us as well, is it's not that we think that by taking this approach we're being really clever and avoiding all the challenges. The challenges we know are going to be just as hard, but they're different challenges, and they're challenges that we as game developers feel much more capable of tackling against. So the challenges that we have, for example, is finding the right game is incredibly hard, because you have to find a team that isn't adverse to working in this space, and you have to find somebody who's prepared to accept the possibility of a Web3 version of the game. And as I say, with so much ideological positions in the games industry now, that's not in itself necessarily easy to do. You have to find a game that's been built in a particular way that will make it relatively easy to convert. So generally things that are built around standard game engines like Unity or Unreal, things like that. And then you have to find games of specific genres that have the elements that you would expect in a Web3 game, some kind of economy. So if you look at the entire games industry and all the games and narrow that down to that subset of it, and then they have to be for sale. Essentially, the company needs to be willing to sell them. So that's a challenge in itself at the moment. And we have to be very careful about selecting that game as well, because once we commit to it, that, you're in at that point, and there's a lot you can, there's a lot of problems you can face if you get that wrong. So we've got to be very careful with that. And we're not in a particular rush to do it as well, because there are other areas we're exploring just now, such as the data analytics aspects of Web3, because we understand, obviously, blockchain being a public medium in many regards, getting data from blockchains is possible, at least. And we already have a history of having analytics within games, which most games, modern games, will have some form of analytics within them. And so we're now looking at the possibility of joining those up. Like in free-to-play games, for example, you have certain metrics that are really important, such as your lifetime value of customer, your retention rates, day 1, day 7, day 30, all these things. So, but these metrics weren't initially obvious to companies that were working in the free-to-play space. They became obvious later on as more companies worked in the space and discovered what mattered. And we think there's going to be a similar thing in the play to earn space as well, where there will be similar but different metrics that you'll be able to pick out by looking at not just the game analytics themselves, but looking at the blockchain analytics and the comparison interface between that. So there's a technology aspect to what we're doing as well that we're quite excited about. I think is going to help our value. So so we're kind of looking at that moment whilst we're waiting to find the right opportunity to purchase the
Yeah. So it sounds like you're definitely, on the market. You are looking for those kind of traditional games that have a good fit for the Web3 space. So probably not a Flappy Birds type of game, but something a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Do you?
And we're having those conversations right now. We're speaking to a number of companies just now about acquiring things like that. But as you know, these things take time.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about your kind of the Web 2 experience that you've had and how that game development experience that you've done in the past, kind of you're bringing that into Web 3? What are the type of games that you built in the past, and what did you like about that space?
Yeah, so as I say, I worked on over 100 games at this point. I started in the early 90s working on platforms like Super Nintendo and Sega Mega Drive. And then from there I worked through the sort of change to PlayStation 1, Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, and right through to now, where we're working on Xbox One, PlayStation 5, and Apple Arcade, these kind of things. So my route into the industry, I started as an audio designer. That's how I snuck in as the guy that makes the bleeps and blops. That's where I got my break in the industry. And then, when I joined, it was just a massive growth period for the industry. So quite quickly, I ended up, just because the company I was working for, which was DMA Design, based in Scotland, they'd created a game called Lemmings, which was a huge hit back in the early 90s, and it was a global hit. It was one of the few games at that time that crossed over from the west to the east, so it was huge in Japan, which was unusual.
I remember playing it. Thank you.
Pardon?
I remember playing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to hear. But that attracted the interest of Nintendo. So Nintendo had started working with DMA, and we ended up as part of their dream team for Nintendo 64. So I worked on a lot of what would be considered AAA games at that point, but the one that everybody has heard of, and the only one that anybody really cares about at this point, is Grand Theft Auto. So we were the studio. I was working at the studio, one of the original designers on Grand Theft Auto, specifically audio designer. So I was the guy who had the challenge of trying to create some sort of interesting, exciting audio design for GTA, and that's where the radio stations that we now it's ubiquitous in every version of the game since. That's where that came from. Was just trying to do something interesting.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's one of those things, it was just another day at the office at the time, but apparently people liked it, so that's good. Yeah, so that really kind of changed my career in that regard and gave me the opportunity. I worked on the first 3 Grand Theft Autos, and then it became clear that DMA Design and Rockstar North, as it became, was going to become a Grand Theft Auto factory at that point, and that wasn't something that appealed to me. I'd joined the industry when it was really pioneering, and there was no playbook. You were literally making stuff up as you went, and I enjoyed that. So I took the opportunity to step away from AAA and into what's now regarded as indie gaming. There wasn't really a term for it at the moment. We just wanted to make smaller games with smaller teams that were more focused on gameplay, less reliant on graphics and only. So I set up a studio in Scotland called Denki, which that was 2000. I did that. So, and it's still going now. So I'm pleased to say that Denki is now Scotland's longest established independent game developer.
That's great.
It released its first game for Game Boy Advance in 2001, called Denki Blocks, and just released its latest game, Autonauts versus Pirate Bots, for Steam in 2022. So yeah, that's been a huge success, and it's been a great opportunity to just explore different types of games, because obviously Grand Theft Auto was amazing and having the opportunity to work on that type of thing, but it's a particular type of game, and if you were just working on that all the time, it would become a little bit stale. You're not really learning much, you're just regurgitating the same thing. Once you've had the idea for making radio stations and putting DJs in and creating spoof adverts, all that sort of thing, it's then just a case of doing it. And as exciting and fun as that is, it's not nearly as exciting as creating it from scratch. So at Denki, we were able to just explore a lot of weird, different kind of, I guess you'd call them more art projects than the traditional mainstream game projects that I'd traditionally been doing in AAA. And that just gave me an opportunity to really see game development from every angle and learn the intricacies of how games get made, how all the elements influence each other, and just how fragile game development, game designs are.
Oh yeah,
I think that's one of the things that we're seeing in Web3 now. That when I look at the first batch of Web3 games that we're kind of coming out of the tail end of now into the next generation, you can see that a lot of the design decisions that got made in that batch of games, the designs had elements that worked against each other. They weren't complementary. They didn't work in a holistic fashion. So,
what do you think is some of the cause of that? Just people trying to reinvent the wheel, or?
Partly, I think part of it is that, to begin with, it's been hard to get people from the games industry involved in the space, or harder, because most people who are in the games space are quite happy working in whatever aspect they are, whether it's free-to-play, mobile, indie, who knows, so a lot of the people who are coming in to make the games in Web3 maybe don't have a lot of actual game development experience. That's changing, fortunately. We're starting to see a lot more experienced people coming in now, but certainly that initial batch, you didn't have the experience. So a lot of them were learning how to make games, and that's hard. It just is.
Not only are you learning Web3, but you're also learning how to make games.
Yeah, and you're also learning economics, right? Yeah, you're learning game development. You're learning audience interaction. You know how to deal with an audience, fan base, and you're also learning economics at the same time. You're figuring out how the economy works, because in Web 2, we've had the opportunity to keep all the economy stuff inside a kind of a closed system. But in Web 3, as soon as you open that up, then it doesn't just make the problem twice as hard to solve. It makes the problem 10 times as hard to solve.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So do you have a piece of advice for Web3 developers that are kind of, just getting into the space now and need some suggestions on problems to avoid?
Uh, I mean, my advice would be the same advice I give to young game developers when they come into the space for the first time in
Run.
the first games is assume nothing
Mm-hmm.
and be very wary if you hear anybody use the word just in relation to game design, and that we're just going to do this, or we're just going to implement this feature, or we're just going to implement that feature. In my experience, it's never as easy as you think it will be.
Yeah.
And I wrote a blog on this just recently about what I call the derivative effects of game design changes, and that very often most people who haven't worked in game design before, they'll be aware of the primary first order effect of a game design change. So
yeah,
you increase the value of an item, more people will try to acquire that item.
Mm-hmm.
Or you've got two paths. One is hard to go down, one's easy to go down. People will go down the easy one more than go down the hard one. That first order effect is very easy to determine. What's harder to keep in mind is the derivative effects, the second, third, sometimes fourth order effects. What the knock-on effects of that are on all sorts of other areas that you don't expect. And game design I always think game design is a complex system in the same way that you have weather is a complex system, the economy is a complex system, and that you can't accurately predict if you poke that part of it, this part is going to react in a certain way. You just don't know until you try it. And so the shorter you can make the distance between the idea of the design on paper or in your head
mm-hmm.
and actually trying it in within a game, the shorter you can make that distance, I think the more effective you can be as a game developer. Because there are so many things that you try as a game developer and you expect it to work. It works great when you think about it, and then you implement it and it just doesn't work. I think it's the same as any creative medium, right? It's the same as books, films, television, all music, all these things. And the idea in your head is one thing, but the realization of that can be quite separate, and the two never match. So the quicker you can realize it, make it tangible, and judge it, the better. So
I think that's definitely some great advice. So I'm kind of curious with your jump into Web3 from more, again, the more traditional Web 2. What do you think is kind of your favorite aspect of what Web3 game development provides, or what you can do there?
Well, for me, the main attraction for Web3 is the possibility of digital property rights. Mm-hmm. That's the bit that really excites me. The idea that we as game developers can actually give property rights to our players and let them control them, give them sovereignty over them in the way that Bitcoin promises to give sovereignty to asset holders. And so that to me is really interesting. Mm-hmm. And to allow players to manage them not only within the ecosystem of the game, as we have to some extent in the past, but to allow them to essentially take them outside of the game. That's something that I don't say lightly, because I know it's often thrown around, this idea of, with NFTs you can take this NFT, you can take this asset from one game, put it in another game, and it'll work. Like, conceptually, I understand that. I think it's a really exciting prospect. The game developer in me knows how hard that is to achieve in practice, and so I don't underestimate what's involved in doing that. But that's certainly one of the things that we're interested in exploring with Reforged. Is we think that while it would be difficult in the short term to make NFTs compatible across different games for all sorts of reasons, some technical, some contractual, some commercial, and everything in between, if we are able to build a portfolio of games, then we can find solutions that at least allow people to move things around within our portfolio of games, because
That's good. Good approach.
Yeah, it takes out you might have the technical challenges, but you don't then have the contractual and or intellectual property and or commercial challenges that we went along. So, and that allows us to do what I think is going to be necessary in this space, and it's certainly what I saw in the game space, which is it takes time to solve all these problems. I think.
Yeah.
Yes, when you're at the start of a new industry and a new era and an industry, quite easy for people to imagine what the end result is. So, for example, with the Wright brothers, once you've got a plane that flies with an engine, it must have been really easy at that point for a whole bunch of people to say, oh, well, if you can do that, then the future is going to look like this. Envisaging it is one thing. Actually building it is a whole other thing.
That's very true.
And takes a lot of time and a lot of mistakes along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where we are with Web3 at the moment, in that it's relatively easy for anybody to look at what's happening now, see all the bits, and go, oh, it's going to go this way, or it's going to go that way. What usually happens with these things, though, is you kind of overestimate what can happen in the short term, and then underestimate what can happen in the long term. And that's certainly what I saw in the games industry, where as soon as we saw arcade games, you could imagine what games in 30 years were going to look like with hyper-realistic graphics and all that sort of thing. But you couldn't believe how long it took to actually get there. Once you're there, it's like it was always like this, but you've actually had to take a long way around. And
that was a piece of cake, no problem.
Yeah, it's like, what took you so long?
So I've been, personally very impressed with a lot of the advances that people have been making with NFTs in the space, and how game developers are taking advantage of those. Is there, what are your thoughts on, what is coming with Web3 assets? Is there something that you're particularly excited about seeing? I won't ask you to talk about what's going to be 5 years down the road, because in all honesty, 5 minutes, things change so fast. But is there something kind of in development that you're excited about?
Well, certainly one of the things that I'm interested in is that ability to take assets from one game to another.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting to see that now. So that's something that I'd be excited to see. And I've had the opportunity through various other projects that I'm involved in to actually fund some really small scale experiments to allow game developers to look at that specific problem of how do two developers who are not working on the same project create a pipeline, essentially, to allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how can that be done in a recreatable way that can create a protocol that standardizes the process, and then anybody can do it relatively easily. So that's something that I think once that's working, it's going to be really exciting for people. There's going to be all sorts of possibility. It'll take some management of expectations, though, because I think there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are sold on the idea of you can just take your sword or your gun from World of Warcraft and take it into Diablo, and it'll just work the same, and there's all sorts of reasons why that won't work. And I always say, if you want to understand challenges, just imagine, like, chess and checkers are like very similar. You look at the board and the pieces. Just imagine what happens if you take the queen from chess into a game of checkers. It doesn't just have it's not just a physical thing. The rules that have to be.
How do you even balance that piece on the top?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's like that'll never work. You have to, like, I don't know, get glue or something. So that's exciting.
So I'm kind of curious. Is there anything that you have learned in what you've been developing in Web3 that you think might be helpful to people?
Well, I guess if anybody who reads through my blogs will probably begin to realize that my one learning from all the research and thinking that I've been doing in this space is that it's going to I think it's going to be much easier to solve the challenges of Web3 if we start with a tangible game that already exists and that you can already measure all the bits, you can already see the effects that design changes have on player behavior, etc. And that trying to do anything like that in the abstract, it just compounds the variables to a point where I can't, even as an experienced game designer who has had the opportunity to solve some pretty complex design challenges in my time, I cannot imagine how complex that would be to solve. And that's not to say it can't be solved. I've seen lots of teams solve things that I would never have believed they could. So I'm not saying it won't happen. I just think it's going to be a lot more difficult than a lot of companies think it's going to be. So my one piece of advice would be, if you have the opportunity, don't start trying to explore the Web3 part of the problem that you're solving until you've solved the Web2 part, until you have that game design that you're sure it works. You've got an audience built around it. You understand the player behavior. You understand your metrics for how the game works there. Once you have that, then go and explore the Web3 stuff, because I think if you try to do it at the same time, there's just too many moving parts. It's going to be really hard to know that change affected that outcome, and it wasn't just some random thing.
So kind of like what you were talking about with the Wright brothers. So build the plane first, and then add the jet engines to it later.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't try and do them both at the same time. Don't try and invent the plane and the jet engine simultaneously. Just do one and then step on to the next one.
Do one, get it right, and then move on.
Yeah, that would be my approach. Other people may be more adventurous in that regard, but my experience has taught me to respect the size of the challenges when it comes to the game design part, and also respect the challenges when it comes to the economics.
Alrighty. So we have a few minutes left here. I would love to hear a little bit more about Reforged and kind of where you guys are going, and anything you would like to kind of close out with here.
Yeah, well, like I say, I mean, we're right at that stage just now where we are looking for acquisition targets. So if anybody does have a game that is working well in Web2 at the moment, you have an established audience, you have an economy, and your game is built in some sort of standardized engine. You haven't built your own bespoke engine to get it working, and you're interested in an exit where you looking to sell that. Please get in touch, because we are actively looking to make purchases in that area at the moment. Also, data. We're looking to work with games companies who are in the blockchain space, who are interested in exploring the interface between the blockchain data and the game analytics data, and using both of those data pipelines to analyze player behavior and predict outcomes and sort of thing. So we're exploring that area just now. So anybody again who's interested in looking at that, please get in touch. We'd love to have a conversation.
All right. We'll be sure to include your contact info along with the blog info in the notes here. And if people need help with the economy side of things, I'm sure we would be happy to help them out here with economics design. Colin, I really appreciate your time very much.
Likewise,
an amazing journey that you've had in the industry here, and definitely on the cutting edge of some new and exciting stuff.
Hopefully, yeah.
All righty. Thank you very much. And again, I appreciate everyone joining us for another economics design podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you.